Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So today we're unpacking one of the absolute most fascinating narratives from ancient history. Seriously, at its core, this is a high-stakes psychological test of character. We're looking at the unshakable integrity of Joseph. We're going to map out exactly how one secret decision changed a man's destiny forever, and more importantly, how the mechanics of that decision totally still apply to us today.
Now, I want you to start by putting yourself right in the scenario. Imagine being young, highly successful, but completely and utterly alone in a foreign country. You've got no family around you, no friends to lean on, absolutely no one is watching what you do. And in that total isolation, you are handed the ultimate secret temptation, a promise of immediate pleasure with absolute secrecy. If you knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that you'd never get caught, would you have the strength to walk away?
Section 1. Alone and under pressure. Let's look at Joseph's vulnerability.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the immense pressure of the situation Joseph found himself in, we have to trace his trajectory. Because, wow, you can literally see the absolute whiplash of his journey. I mean, he starts off as the favored, beloved son of his father Jacob. But as you can guess, that favor breeds some intense, violent jealousy in his brothers. In this devastating betrayal, they actually sell him into slavery and convince their dad he's dead. Suddenly, Joseph loses everything: his home, his family, his freedom. He's dragged down to Egypt as a slave. Now, he could have become incredibly bitter, right? But instead, he works relentlessly. He actually earns the trust of a high-ranking Egyptian official named Potiphar and quickly rises to become the head of that entire household. So things are finally looking up.
Section 2. The ultimate character test. Facing Potiphar's wife.
Right as he hits this new pinnacle of stability, bam! He faces the ultimate character test. Potiphar's wife notices this handsome young manager, and she begins a relentless daily campaign of persuasion. And if we break down the anatomy of this temptation, we see exactly why it was so incredibly dangerous. You see, this wasn't just a one-time offer. The source material specifically notes she pressured him day after day. And real temptation? Yeah, it rarely gives up after the first no. Plus, consider the environment here. Complete isolation. Today, we've got smartphones, social media footprints, accountability partners. There were absolutely no Ring doorbell cameras or read receipts in ancient Egypt. Joseph had none of that. He was a slave, far from home, literally no one would ever know. It would have been so incredibly easy to just justify giving in to that promise of immediate pleasure and total secrecy.
But Joseph, he didn't look at the situation the way most people would. He understood something fundamental. He saw temptation not as a simple risk assessment, not as a game of what can I get away with, but as a profound identity crisis. For him, this was a test of who he was choosing to become in the dark.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the clear contrast between typical human nature and Joseph's massive paradigm shift. Normally, we ask things like, will I get caught? Does it feel good right now? Is everyone else doing it? But Joseph didn't ask a single one of those things. His entire focus was on whether the act was fundamentally right and whether it would betray the immense trust his master, Potiphar, had placed in him.
And this brings us to his ultimate anchor. When confronted by Potiphar's wife, Joseph asks this incredibly profound question: how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? That perspective, it changed everything. He elevated the situation from a mere secret transaction between two people straight to a moral absolute. His integrity wasn't dependent on who was in the room, it was firmly anchored to his faith and his core values.
Which leads us directly to the climax of the story. One day, the situation escalates dramatically. Joseph walks into the house to do his work, and the house is completely empty of other servants. Potiphar's wife sees her perfect opportunity. She physically grabs his garment and demands he sleep with her. In that high adrenaline, split-second moment, Joseph doesn't negotiate. He doesn't try to argue with her or see how close to the edge he can get. He simply runs. He literally leaves his garment in her hands and flees. His greatest act of strength wasn't staying and fighting. It was knowing that the only way to win this battle was to run away from it entirely.
Section 3. The cost of doing right. Facing unfair consequences.
Now, if this were a typical fairy tale, Joseph would be immediately praised for his virtue, right? But real life doesn't always work that way. Prepare for a massive, shocking plot twist. His reward for doing the right thing? Prison. Yep, Potiphar's wife is humiliated, and she is furious that she was rejected. So she takes the very garment Joseph left behind and uses it as false evidence to frame him for assault. Potiphar believes his wife, and Joseph is instantly thrown behind bars. The irony here is just stark and painful. He protected his integrity, and he lost his freedom because of it.
You can probably feel the frustration of how unfair life can be. We so often expect that doing the right thing guarantees immediate success, that good deeds act like some sort of cosmic vending machine for instant rewards. But the reality is much harsher. So the crucial point is this: integrity often comes with a painful price. Sometimes choosing obedience and character leads you straight through unfair difficulty before you ever see a victory. Joseph had to sacrifice his short-term comfort to maintain his long-term character.
Section 4. From prison to power. The road to vindication.
But listen, the story doesn't end in that prison cell. His path to the palace is an absolute masterclass in resilience. Because even in the darkest, most unfair circumstances, he flat out refused to surrender his character. Even though he's sitting in prison under completely false pretenses, he remains absolutely faithful and trustworthy. Just like he did in Potiphar's house, he works hard, and eventually he gains the respect of the prison guards, earning new responsibilities. Years pass, and eventually, through a series of extraordinary events and divine guidance, Joseph is called upon to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh himself. Because of his incredible wisdom, he's elevated to become the second most powerful leader in all of Egypt. This falsely accused slave transforms into the savior of the nation, guiding them through a devastating famine and saving countless lives.
Section 5, Your Private Victories Matter, the Hidden Reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates an epic turnaround. Now, the details of Joseph's life might be centuries old, sure, but the core struggles, relationships, money, power, personal ambition, they are completely identical to the temptations we face right now. The world only ever sees the public victories, right? The massive success, the palace. But the hidden reality is where the truth actually lies. Character is built and destiny is shaped in the quiet, private moments. Think about it. If Joseph had given in to temptation in that empty house, history would have never known his name. He never would have developed the unshakable integrity required to lead a nation and save lives. The public success was entirely born out of a private victory. Which leaves us with this final, lingering question to reflect on. What will you do when temptation knocks and absolutely no one else is around? Your answer to that question might just shape your future far more than you realize. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep building that character, and I'll see you next time.